are you ready to turn up the heat? As our first invited session of the day is none other than the first ever Congress debate. Should high schools impose full-day smartphone bans? Please welcome to the stage debate moderator and longtime scientific advisor for Children and Screens, Dr. Paul Weigle, and our debate teams.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Children and Screens debate. Should high schools impose full-day smartphone bans? And I believe there are slides that will be projected. Fantastic. All right. My name is Paul Weigle I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist from UConn School of Medicine, and for more than 20 years I've done translation of science to clinical practice regarding youth with problematic media use, and it's been my honor to serve on the Children and Screens Advisory Board since 2016, and I'll be the moderator for today's program. I don't have any conflicts of interest to share. Here's our learning objectives. They are available in your conference materials. So this is the agenda for today's program. So we're going to start out by introducing you to our esteemed debaters, and then you're going to vote on the proposition to establish a baseline. We're going to hear opening arguments from each team. Then they're going to have a chance to rebut the arguments made by the other team. Then you as the audience are going to have a chance to ask questions to any of our debaters. So please keep them in mind as we go forward. We're going to then hear closing arguments from each team, and we're going to have a final vote. And whichever team convinces more of you to move to their side are going to be declared our winners. So again, the proposal that will be debated today is this: high schools should impose full-day smartphone bans. And of course, this is such a timely topic. We know that 13 states have moved to make this universal among schools in their home states. And I've heard this mentioned no less than 4 times in previous presentations here this weekend. So a really hot topic in the area of children and screens. Now, please remember that this debate is an educational activity, so our debaters are going to be arguing positions that don't necessarily represent their own views, and certainly not that of children and screens. All right, so it's time to meet our debate teams. First up, we're going to meet those who are arguing that high schools should impose full-day smartphone bans. That is Team Proposition. First off, we have Josh Golin. He is the Executive Director of Fair Play, a leading independent watchdog of children's media and marketing industries, and an advocate of phone-free schools. Please join me in welcoming Josh Golin. And Dr. Golin discloses that Fair Play's phone-free school initiatives advocacy, which includes a small portion of his time, is funded by the Walton's Trust. Next up, we have Daniel Buck, a research fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He's worn many hats previously. He's been an English teacher. He's been the assistant principal at a classic charter school, a senior visiting fellow at Thomas B. Fordham Institute, and he's also the author of the book, What is Wrong with Our Schools? Please welcome Daniel Buck. And he has no conflicts of interest to disclose. Next up, we're going to meet those that are arguing that high schools should not impose full-day smartphone bans. It's Team Opposition. Dr. Carlene MacMillan is an adult child and adolescent psychiatrist and chief product officer at Radial. She is the co-chair of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry's Public Resources Committee and mom to 9-year-old twins. Please welcome Dr. MacMillan. And last but, and Dr. MacMillan does have disclosures here, but nothing is related to her presentation today. And last but definitely not least, we have Brandon Cardet-Hernandez, the president of Mrs. Wordsmith, which is a leading innovation in children's literacy education. Now, he's a lifelong advocate for educational equity, and he's helped shape policy as a senior advisor in New York City government, has served as a school principal, and currently serves on the Boston School Committee and the Massachusetts Council for Latino Empowerment. Please welcome Brandon Cardet-Hernandez. All right. He has no conflicts of interest to disclose. Okay. So I just want to go over the debate rules. Again, you're going to vote on the proposition before and after, and whichever team convinces more of you to their side of the vote will be declared the winners. Now, this means... Is betting allowed? There you go. As long as I get 10%, yes. So what this means, though, is that whoever gets the most votes at the end of the debate is not necessarily going to be the winner. It's whichever team convinces more of you when compared to the initial vote. So this means that if you're absolutely certain, and no one's really going to convince you about your position on this proposition, certainly select yes or no for the initial vote. But if you're open to being persuaded by either team, and you want to be sort of a swing voter with the most impactful vote, I encourage you to select undecided. But it is time. So if you get out your smartphones and you scan the QR code, you'll be prompted to weigh in. Should high schools impose full-day smartphone bans? And you will cast your vote to either support the proposition, oppose it, or whether you're undecided. All right, I think our votes are cast, and I think at this point we can go ahead. Oh, they're still moving. Some folks are still making last-minute votes. But if we can go ahead and share, oh, we have already, fantastic. So we see the results here, and we see that 33% believe yes, 19% of you voted no, and 48% are undecided. So a lot of open-minded folks, open to persuasion, so that should make for an exciting debate. Great. And we could go ahead and move back to the slides. Thank you. Excellent. All right. We talked about the results. It's time for our opening argument. So during the section, both teams will have 9 uninterrupted minutes to present arguments in favor of their position. And we're going to begin with team proposition.
Thanks so much, Paul, and thanks to Children in Screens for hosting another fantastic conference. Over the past 15 years, schools have been radically transformed by smartphones. Classrooms are different, hallways are different, cafeterias are different, even trips to the bathroom are different. This transformation wasn't led by educators or driven by research suggesting that phones are great learning tools. Phones invaded schools because cultural and marketing forces made phones a must-have for kids and teens. That's been a boon to social media companies and those that benefit from heavy use by young people. But for most students and educators, the negatives of phones in schools far outweigh the positives. It is well established that the heavy use of smartphones and social media undermines adolescents' well-being. I'm sure we're all familiar with the significant increases in adolescent anxiety, depression, and emergency room visits since smartphones became ubiquitous. And that in 2023, the Surgeon General issued an advisory about the profound risk social media poses to mental health. Implementing bell-to-bell, all-day phone-free school policies in high schools gives adolescents a significant break every day from the technologies that have been deliberately designed to capture their attention. The heaviest users of social media struggle the most with mental health, and giving young people a break for 6 to 7 hours a day means less heavy use. A Norwegian study found that phone bans in middle school led to an almost 60% drop in girls' need to see a mental health counselor. A more recent study of 2 phone-free schools in Massachusetts found that depressive symptoms significantly dropped after schools banned phones for the entire day. Prohibiting phones also gives students a distraction-free learning experience. 72% of teachers say that distraction from phones is a major problem. No wonder when students receive, on average, more than 60 notifications during the school day on their phone, can communicate with anyone they know surreptitiously, and have access to an endless stream of videos, music, and games during class. Not surprisingly, studies show that students who use their phone during class learn less and get lower grades. Young people are desperate for breaks. About half of teens wish social media was never invented, and survey after survey finds that teens, like adults, wish they spent less time on their phones. But behavior rarely changes, in part because the apps young people use are designed to be addictive, and in part because it is very hard for young people to separate from the platforms where all their peers are. Phone-free schools give young people the benefits of breaks without the downsides of FOMO and social isolation that can occur if a young person tries to disconnect on their own. The benefits to students are significantly greater when they are not allowed to have their phones for the entire school day, not just during class time. Research has shown repeatedly that the mere presence of our phones is distracting. Students who know that their phone is away for the day are less likely to think about the next time they can scroll TikTok or the latest social media drama. There's not a ton of research on schools with bell-to-bell all-day phone-free policies yet, but what we do know finds that mental health outcomes improve, grades improve, there is less bullying and fewer disciplinary incidents, and students report less fear of using the bathroom of school and are more physically active during recess. And collecting phones at the beginning of the day, rather than asking teachers to police phone use, reduces power struggles and saves a heck of a lot of time. Bell-to-bell phone-free policies give teachers back their time, students back their attention, and have the potential to improve both student learning and mental health. And they cost very little, these phone bans. That's why in just the past year, a dozen states, both red and blue, from Vermont to Texas, have passed laws requiring bell-to-bell policies for students of all ages, including high school. I have talked to so many schools and read about so many schools that have gone phone-free, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive. I'm not actually aware of a single school that has gone phone-free and then gone back. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my debate partner, who will tell you exactly what it looks like in a phone-free school.
I would like to thank Josh for that astute and comprehensive review of the research, compelling argument, a masterclass in almost a literature review for us. As he said, my job here is to take you inside schools. I have worked as a teacher and an assistant principal in both schools that allowed phones and schools that banned them bell to bell. I myself used to be something of a phone and technology booster, thinking it was going to be the next great revolution in education. I ran much of my classroom online, tried to incorporate phone apps into my classroom, and my mind began to switch. It was just one morning, I can kind of remember it pretty clearly, sitting behind my desk, behind my desk. In those opening moments, this kind of transient moments before the school day really begins, we probably all remember them. Bus drops you off, the bell to start the day doesn't ring for 10, 15 minutes. It's this kind of in-between space where not a whole lot happens. And what do we probably remember? Talking with friends over random what-if questions, maybe 2 or 3 friends, the artistic students in the corner drawing together. One boy just learned how to make an origami swan, and he's showing his friends how to do it. Just milling about, socializing. My classroom that morning, I looked out over it, and all of the heads were craned down. No one was talking, just scrolling. Quiet. You go into the lunchroom, and kids were talking, but it wasn't the kind of like healthy, raucous, crazy atmosphere that we might remember. Again, kids are all just sitting around their lunch tables, looking down, scrolling. Maybe they lean over and kind of chuckle and show their friend a funny meme or TikTok video, but then they all go back to their own isolated, alone, little experience with their screen. This is the social impact of phones in schools. A common concept in sociology is the idea of weak tie and strong tie relationships. I'm sure most of the people sitting in this room, you're all brilliant, you're familiar with the concept, but just in case, strong tie relationships or strong tie bonds are our close loved ones, our family members, our best friends. Why they are important to us, I think, is self-evident. Also important are weak tie relationships or weak tie bonds, kind of our passing acquaintances, that person that you walk past on campus or on the street every day and you recognize their face, you don't know their name, but you wave to them because, you know, you like their dog. Your acquaintances, your barista or bartender, depending on your preferred drink. They give us a sense of belonging, a sense of normalcy, a sense of safety in our lives. They are also important, both the strong and weak tie relationships. Phones interrupt both of them. It is far harder to strike up a conversation with your friend about a funny what-if scenario because you're all busy, isolated, staring at your screens. Kids aren't going to be waving at the teachers, you know, giving their kindergarten teacher a hug as they walk down the hall because they're walking down the hall. Just doing that all day. These are the social impacts. And then there's the academic impacts too. Learning requires effort. It requires sustained focus. Learning can be fun, but it is hard work. It takes cognitive effort. It is cognitively demanding. A phone is like a glass of lemonade and a tray of donuts for a runner doing hill workouts. By golly, it is tempting, it is easy, it is neutral, it is not as demanding as writing an essay or reading your book is. So it is always calling out to you. Our working memory can only process so many things at one time. To learn something, we have to think about it. If our students are constantly distracted by their phones, they are in a constant state of half attention, not attending to their teacher, not attending to their classwork. So long as students are connected to their phones during the school day, they are disconnected from their friends, they're disconnected from their academics, they're disconnected from their teachers, they're disconnected from their schools, they're disconnected from their lives, and that is why it is imperative that we implement bell-to-bell bans in elementary, middle school, and high schools. And that is my timer.
Thank you, team proposition. And now we're going to hear opening arguments from team opposition.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much for having me today. So we're having this debate at a time when American education is in crisis, and I don't use that word lightly. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 2/3 of American students, nearly 70%, are not reading proficiently. Students of color score even lower, with only 18% of Black students, 21% of Latino students meeting proficiency standards. This is not new. This has been true since the 90s. Despite decades of reform and investment, achievement levels have hardly moved. So let's be clear. We did not start struggling when smartphones showed up in classrooms. And in the places where phones have been banned, we haven't seen any surge in achievement. Phones are not the reason kids are behind. They're just the latest scapegoat for a system that has still not figured out how to serve all students well. What's changed in the last few years isn't just phone usage. It's that students are disengaged, they are disorganized, and they are absent. Chronic absenteeism has doubled since the pandemic. In many districts, 1 in 4 students are missing 10% or more of school. In New York City, nearly half of Black and Latino high school students were chronically absent last year. This isn't about devices. It's about whether schools feel relevant, whether it meets kids where they are, and whether we're preparing them for the world they actually live in. We oppose full-day smartphone bans because they won't solve these problems and could make them worse. Instead, we're calling for training teachers and students in how to use technology productively and responsibly. Consider the evidence. 92% of jobs require digital skills, and advanced tech jobs pay up to 45% more. Yet most students get little to no direct instruction in digital literacy or digital organization. 2022 study from McCrell found that teaching digital tools improves attention and critical thinking. 2019 Gallup New School Survey found that students using digital tools weekly were 15% more likely to be engaged. So here's the truth. We are not teaching kids how to use these tools well. Instead, we're blaming them for not knowing. If you hand a student a smartphone, with no guidance, no boundaries, and no training, of course it will become a distraction. But that's not a student problem. That's a systems problem. That, inconveniently, is an adult problem. We don't ban pencils for doodling or paper for passing notes. We teach, and then we manage classroom behavior. This is absolutely no different. Let's talk about equity. A blanket ban assumes every student has a laptop, a home computer, and broadband access. Nearly 15% of students lack home internet access. Many schools won't be able to sustain one-to-one devices once this ESSER funding dries up. And for these students, a phone is their only personal learning tool. They write papers on these phones. A ban doesn't level the playing field, it tilts it further. For many students, phones are more than learning tools. They are essential to managing real responsibilities. About 1 in 4 high school students hold a job. 8% of children in America act as primary caregivers for siblings or family members. Nearly a third of middle and high school students in America care for someone at home at least part of the day. These students use their phones to coordinate work schedules, to check in on family, and navigate complex lives that schools often overlook. And let's be honest, many of the parents and advocates who are most vocal about phone bans aren't raising kids with these responsibilities. Their advocacy often comes from a place of comfort, not necessity. Instead of banning smartphones, we should be teaching digital citizenship, how to evaluate sources, communicate online, manage screen time, protect their privacy and their well-being. Schools should be safe places to practice these skills with the support of adults and not to be punished for needing them. To be clear, we are not advocating for a free-for-all phone use. We're advocating for smart, structured, and instructional use so that students are learning how to use the tools they will rely on for the rest of their lives. And we are advocating for systems that support teachers in managing the complexities and opportunities that handheld devices bring. The world our students will graduate into is digital, and we owe them an education that's preparing them for that reality, not shielding them from it. And now my partner is going to take the stage.
Thanks, Brandon. So we all know that swimming can be dangerous if you don't know how to swim or if you jump into shark-infested waters. And sure, it's not a great idea to just go swimming instead of doing your homework assignment, but should we tell kids to refrain from swimming altogether to keep them safe and focused on their school? Of course not. We teach them how to swim and early because learning to manage risk is better than pretending water doesn't exist. So why are we taking such an extreme all-or-nothing stance on smartphones in schools? As a child and adolescent psychiatrist and mom to 9-year-old twins, I know firsthand avoidance doesn't build skills, guidance does. Smartphones, tablets, and watches are part of the world our children are growing up in. Teaching them how to manage technology, build digital citizenship, and develop time management is as essential today as learning to swim. And let's not forget, kids are not just swimming in pools. They navigate oceans of online content, social pressure, and digital communication every day. It's our job to equip them with the judgment and boundaries to stay afloat in that world too. Yes, banning smartphones makes for a great political soundbite, but the research is far more nuanced. The Kaiser Family Foundation reviewed dozens of studies and found no consistent, strong evidence that banning phones improves academic outcomes. Many of these studies linking phones to poor performance are correlational. We know correlation isn't causation. Phones don't create distraction. Being off task is the issue, whether it's a smartphone or making a paper airplane or passing a note to your friend. As Brandon said, we don't ban pencils because people are passing notes. A large UK study in the Lancet Regional Health found no difference in overall daily screen time, mental health, physical activity, or sleep between schools with strict bans and schools with more relaxed policies. Bans just shift the screen time management back to the families after school. When New York City actually lifted its ban in 2015, it was after concerns it was disproportionately enforced in low-income communities. And you know what happened? Suspensions dropped. Why? Because kids were not being penalized just for having a phone. Total bans breed power struggles, not a culture of respect. Is policing device use really the best use of our educators' time? Students are also hyper-attuned to when teachers aren't held to the same standards. Hypocrisy undermines credibility. And families want to stay connected. In a 2024 survey by the National Parents Union, which represents minority and low-income families, 78% of parents said their child should have a phone at school for emergencies. 58% cited logistics, and nearly half mentioned mental health and emotional needs. These parents are not asking for unlimited access. They're asking for reasonable use during lunch, breaks, or emergencies. That's not indulgence, that's compassion and common sense. And bans can also have unintended consequences. Students who sneak phones might encounter cyberbullying or predatory behavior and hesitate to report it, fearing punishment. When we make phones contraband, we increase secrecy, and secrecy is where real harm thrives. I don't want my children to see smartphones as forbidden fruit, something to hide or misuse. I want them to see these devices as tools for learning, connection, and creativity. Isn't that what schools are for? Not to take breaks, but to prepare kids for the world they'll inherit, a world that runs on technology. We need policies that allow for individual needs, like a child with diabetes might need their phone to monitor blood sugar. A child with anxiety might rely on mindfulness app between classes. We can adopt fear-based bans, or we can take an evidence-based approach that teaches kids to use tech mindfully and responsibly. As both a psychiatrist and a mother, I urge you to choose the latter. We won't prepare kids for the real world by pretending it's not digital. Let's stop pretending the water isn't there. Let's teach them how to swim.
Thank you, Team Opposition. We're now going to hear a rebuttal round. During this section, each team is going to have 4 uninterrupted minutes to present arguments against the opposing team. All right, and we're going to begin again with Team Proposition.
A lot to unpack there. I guess the first thing I would say is if anybody in the audience believes a smartphone is a pencil, that you should vote against bans. But a smartphone is obviously not a pencil. It is, no child was ever consumed using a pencil 14, 16 hours a day. Pencils aren't keeping kids up at night. Pencils aren't showing kids porn, giving violent video games, social media. I could go on and on. Our opponents mentioned the Lancet study, which got a lot of press. I think it's important to note this was a correlational study, and it had some severe limitations. What the authors of that study did was they looked at schools and they divided them into what they called permissive and restrictive schools. The permissive schools, on the whole, were schools that banned phones from classrooms and only allowed them to use them when kids weren't in class. The quote-unquote restrictive schools were almost entirely schools that allowed kids to keep their phones on them, but didn't allow them, they weren't supposed to take them out. There's not actually a lot of difference between telling kids you can have your phones on you, but you can't use them versus you can use them. So not surprisingly, the results weren't very different. One of the interesting things about that study was that overall phone use was not different for the two groups. So that suggests that really there wasn't a lot of difference happening when they were in school, and we shouldn't put so much stock in that study. They talked a lot about digital tools and the importance of getting kids ready for the quote-unquote real world. Nobody is saying that high schools should not have computers or that kids shouldn't be given opportunities to use technology. We're talking about a device that is taking away children's attention constantly. And then the last thing that I'll just say is, actually, I forgot what I was going to say, so I'll turn it over to my partner.
Yes, banning phones creates a logistical hurdle. Yes, students are going to sneak their phones in the bathroom. Let them have the bathrooms. Like, fine, that's the battle's won, if that's where they're kind of sneaking them out. But there's going to be an enforcement end of cell phone policies. But running a school is a logistical hurdle. Any rule that you set in a school, students are going to push against it. Students are going to rebel against it. That's not an argument against schooling itself. That's not an argument against any rules in the school. I just find that wildly unconvincing because, again, having worked in an assistant principal role, every single policy, every single procedure, every single rule that we set in a school caused a bit of a headache for me, but it was for the good of the students. Do teachers have better things to be doing with their time? This is a necessary use of their time, creating a condition and an environment in which students can learn. Making sure all students show up to school dressed with clothing on is a use of their time, but it creates an environment and a context in which students can learn. And then the argument that it's not the phone's fault, I don't think anyone is making the cause that poor scores in school, that phones are kind of a monocausal reason for that. But the evidence that we have coming out from the little bit of research that we do have on bell-to-bell bans finds that it kind of ticks improvement up a little bit. It ticks mental health up a little bit. There's no silver bullet in school policy, and this is one to kind of advance it in a positive direction a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Proposition. We'll now hear rebuttal arguments from Team Opposition.
Timer on. All right. So I'm a skills guy. You know, my career is in education. I was a high school principal in the South Bronx, one of the poorest congressional districts in the country. And I remember when we banned phones in schools. And what I watched was, outside of my school, an entire economy form where kids are paying $5 at a time to store their phone at a bodega. I was watching young people become dysregulated, having to turn over the most expensive thing that they own. The contentious issue that would happen between the entry and the exit of a student was just significant, and I think it is worth noting. For my own son, given the blessings of my life, the idea of handing over a cell phone is going to feel different than the students who I was serving in the Bronx. It's an issue of equity, and the thing that young person is holding, the cost, the value that it holds for them, I just think it's worth noting. I also just want to say that, you know, when we talk about cyberbullying, of course it's real. We want to reduce cyberbullying. The answer isn't in restriction. It is in education. And so removing the phone, and then of course expecting a young person 4 years later to just go to college, never having had any training in how to use it, what to do with it, how to manage their time with it, I think only creates sort of a greater conflict for that young person. These are skills that have to be taught. We are in the business, I am in the business of educating. I have no interest in taking something away and never building skills around it. The other thing I just want to offer too is you know, the greater idea, obviously, that phones are causing harm, mental health harm, and limiting social interaction. Again, I think if we continue to operate in a system, which we have, which is allowing young people to use phones without any skill development around that experience, we will continue to see harm play out. But if we allow ourselves to understand that these phones are realities in our lives, they will only become more important, not in a way that we still want kids to learn how to use laptops, but I'm talking about more important in that handheld device will play a more integral role, a more significant role in the way we organize our time, the way we engage in productivity. We have to train in those skills. We have to develop those skills. We need to teach to it. And if we don't do that, you will continue to see harm. If we take it away for 4 years and then a young person is just sent into the world, they will continue to experience harm. Our kids deserve us to teach them how to use it and how to incorporate it in a meaningful way in their lives.
So I noticed that this conference does not require people to turn in their cell phones at the door or put them into a yonder pouch. I also noticed that at the start of this debate, many of you took out your cell phones, voted on the poll, submitted questions, voted on questions, and what makes it that we as a group are able to manage that, but kids in high school, we don't have enough faith in them that they can do the same with proper guidance. I think the other side talked about that there were not costs associated with cell phone bans. That's actually not the case. In order to implement them, they do need to spend significant amount of money to get the technology to store them, or schools risk significant liability figuring out what to do with them, how to store them, et cetera. And not every school is going to have access to other types of tools to do online polling or other types of tools in class. So I think to say that they don't have any cost or that it's very easy to implement is a gross simplification. And I would just challenge you to think, what if you had to turn your phone at the door today?
What do you think? The time has come to weigh in. Please go ahead and scan the code, enter your questions. Now you can target your question towards an individual or a team, or just make it general, and you will have the capacity to vote on each other's questions to indicate which ones you'd like us to prioritize. And we're going to have 14 minutes for this section. Now, and if we could make it so that I could see the questions here. Great. All right. We will go ahead and get started. This one, I believe, is for either team. Is it possible to both ban or limit school phone use and teach digital literacy? Can we do both? Who would like to start?
Absolutely, we can do both, and we should do both. And I think one of the things that's important is we keep saying that phones are a tool. Phones are a tool, but they're not a tool. They're an appendage. Kids carry around their phones 24/7. We do too. And one of the things, if we want kids to understand that these are tools, one of the things that we need to help them understand is when you use tools and when you don't use tools. And having that undistracted time to learn about English and math and digital literacy is a really important thing. So of course we should do both.
So I would just look at that question, the wording, limit school phone use. I think that we are arguing that a limit rather than a bell-to-bell ban does help children learn digital literacy and learn the context, right? There's many things that we don't expect children to do in the middle of a lecture, in the middle of the classroom, including use a cell phone. And so I think we're not arguing for heads down in the class looking at the phones. We're arguing that they should understand and learn the context, and that's what digital literacy is about.
The only thing I would add is if we are committed to reducing the amount of time a young person spends on social media, then we have to teach them what else that device can do and the power behind that device. And that will only happen in a practicum, not just by me telling you what it can do.
Thank you. And if we could remove the top one, that would be great, and we'll move on to our next question. No one on either side actually mentioned what teens want or what they think, or engaging them in this conversation. What might the debate look like if we centered teen voices? What do teens think?
I love this question. So actually a number of the studies that have looked at how bans have gone have actually centered the voices of teachers, to some extent parents, but really not teens. So it's an excellent point that we should be asking teens what they think is reasonable. I actually asked my kids on the way to camp yesterday what they thought. And my daughter, who's 9 and has a wonderful relationship to technology, actually said, well, of course they should be able to have them on breaks. If they want to do brain rot, that's on their own time, right? So they understand like the pluses and minuses. I said, would you want to bring it to camp? She said, of course not, it's camp, we're here to play. So I think we need to give kids a little bit more credit that they can be reasonable and co-create policies that make sense for the type of learning culture they want to see.
I mean, granted, she's not a teen, but if I allowed my daughter if I took her a poll of what she would like to have for lunch or dinner every day of the week, it would be cupcakes. Cupcakes and lemonade. We can take account of student interest in policies, but the adults in the building set the rules for the good of the students. The institution has to establish its own norms and culture and routines. And I'm uncomfortable with letting students set a policy in a school.
I would add that there's been a lot of conversation from the detractors of the bans about phones sort of in an ideal, almost platonic sense. We need to look at the real context of what phones are and what kids are doing on them. They are using things that have been deliberately designed to capture their attention by any means necessary, whether that means sending them down dangerous rabbit holes, or putting in features that make them more vulnerable to cyberbullying and predators. And so we need to understand that kids are addicted to their phones. Many kids feel that compulsion to use their phones, and so if you ask them, do you want a ban, they're going to be panicked, right? If you ask an alcoholic, are you going to take away their whiskey? They're going to say no, no, no. But one of the things that's really interesting is we don't have a lot of research yet about what kids think after bans have gone in schools, but we do have it from other places, like when kids go to phone-free camps. And after an initial period where they miss their phones like crazy and they don't know what to do with their hands and they don't know how to look somebody in the eyes, they love it. And what kids will tell you is that phone-free camp is one of the best experiences of their year. And yet, as soon as they get out of camp, I picked my daughter up from camp, and if anybody else has had this experience, what's the first thing they do after having an incredible phone-free summer? They go on their phones because that's what they're compelled to do. So just asking kids what they want, they're going to tell you they want their phones. But if you give them those breaks and you give them the opportunity, they're going to tell you something probably much different.
Thank you. This is a question that is directed at Team Proposition. Would school faculty, staff, or administration also be subject to these bans? If not, how do their needs differ from those of students?
Children and adults have different rules. But when I worked in a phone-free school, we did expect teachers to keep their devices away when students were in the classroom, which was almost all of the day. So again, I think there are we have different rules for adults and children. So we allowed them to use them on their lunch breaks and things like this. But I, as an administrator, if I saw a teacher with their phone out during the day, had a conversation with them later in the day. There was an expectation that the students have to keep their devices away. You have to keep your device away.
Yeah, I mean, I think of like family dinner, right? And so if my husband is on his phone at the dinner table when we've designated a screen-free time, that's going to undermine our credibility. That's going to undermine the experience. So I think we agree that in the actual classroom, it does not make sense for anyone to be doing off-task activities on their phone, whether that's scanning TikTok or, checking Craigslist, whatever it is, that's not appropriate for the classroom. But I would challenge that in between, that is not an area where they should be that different. Just to go to the camp example, my kids are at a camp that does not allow devices, and the other day my daughter had tryouts after camp at the same place for gymnastics. She actually forgot her gymnastics outfit, and she was upset that she wasn't able to communicate with me or call. And although she adamantly does not want to use that phone during the camp activities, she did not see why she couldn't communicate during a break that, hey, Mom, can you come bring me my, gymnastics leotard? That's a leotard. It's not caring for an elderly person. But these little examples, they come up all the time. They're just practical.
I would just also say, as we talk about this ban in this moment, we're all engaged in a pedagogical exercise by using our phones. We're submitting questions, we're scanning QR codes, we're doing polling. Again, it's shifting how we think about the use. I think that is so hard for us because none of us receive training on how to use our phones. And so we are actually grappling with our own relationship with the phone. And we have an opportunity to either keep it business as usual, allow kids to have the same relationship with their phones that we do, which is complicated and guilt-ridden, or to train and teach new skills and actually understand the sort of experience that one could have and how to construct the learning opportunities that will get us there.
So I guess my question back to that is, are you saying phones should be mandatory in schools? Because how are you going to use them as pedagogical tools and do surveys if not every student has a phone?
98%.
Doesn't that undermine the equity argument if you're requiring phones?
98% of students in high school right now in America have a smartphone. So just as a blanket high school experience, which is what we're talking about, that's just the reality. They have phones.
Well, 2% don't.
You are right. I think we could close that gap.
All right, I want to get to one or two more quick ones. As a teacher, I would argue that enforcing bans is less work than trying to teach in the presence of phones. Your reactions?
Yes.
I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
As a teacher, I would argue that enforcing bans is less work than trying to teach in the presence of phones.
Oh yeah, it's so much easier. I mean, of course it is easier to teach without a phone there. That is 100% true. That doesn't mean it's better, nor does it mean you're teaching the skills a young person needs for the moment we live in now. There's a lot of nostalgia in this entire debate. Like, I want the childhood I had. Well, it's just not the reality we live in. So yeah, I was a principal of a school with a phone ban. It got easier for adults, and I don't think it got better for kids, because my kids graduated having never learned how to incorporate that piece of technology in their life, and I worry about what their experience then was when they got to college.
There's a lot of nostalgia on our side, and there's also a lot of utopianism on the con side. The idea, like you said, this platonic ideal that we're all going to be revolutionizing education, everything's going to change on the ground. What it always results in is just kids tuning out on TikTok. Teachers cannot compete with the addictive power of the algorithm. I mean, water exists. We need to teach students how to swim. Cigarettes exist, so I guess we should teach students how to, use tobacco responsibly rather than just trying to ban it from their lives.
Thank you. I'm afraid that's the time we have for the Q&A. The time has come for our closing arguments. Here, each side will have 3 uninterrupted minutes to give their final thoughts. And we'll begin again with Team Proposition.
We've heard a lot about how our education system is, really struggling, and students are struggling, and banning smartphones is not a panacea. Of course it's not. But we've also seemed to be implied that allowing smartphones is a panacea, and that's obviously not true either. What we do know is that it is really, really hard to teach to kids who are distracted, who are playing games, who are communicating with people both in the room and out of the room, and that this is a common sense approach to make teaching a little easier and to make learning more compelling. And, it's amazing to see what's happened in the last year with 12 states enacting these full day for every child smartphone bans. And I think we're going to see that continue as we start to see the research on what's happening in these schools. Again, this is not going to solve the educational crisis, but it is an important step that we can take. I think this idea that we're harming poor kids by not, kids from low-income households from not allowing these phones, low-income kids have more screen time than their higher-income peers. The gap is between, kids from from higher-income households have much less screen time, and so the idea that giving kids from low-income households 24/7 access to their phones is going to close the achievement gap, I think, is misguided, and ultimately we can do so much more for kids if we just give them a 7-hour break every day from these devices that have become appendages.
"57 seconds. Here we go. I don't think, I hope that the pro-ban side that we have not come across as this is necessarily a fear-based desire. It's not. Obviously, there's some fear there. There's all of the bad that phones do to us. But I just returned to my own experience in a phone-free school. What struck me was the eye contact. How many students looked at me in the face as they were walking down the hall to the next class? How many kids I didn't know would come up to me like, "Mr. Buck," give me a high five. And that kind of interpersonal interaction just didn't happen in the phones that allowed schools. We can talk about the utopian ideal of what we can accomplish if we incorporate phones and teach students how to use them, but that's just not the case. Working in a phone-free school was such an empowering, social, wonderful experience, and I hope more students get to experience that. Thank you.
And it's time for closing arguments from team opposition.
All right. So the question before us is not whether smartphones and screen time present challenges. They absolutely do. The question is whether full-day bans solve them. The answer, based on research, experience, and common sense, is no. Phones don't cause the education crisis, and banning them won't fix it. Students were struggling long before smartphones arrived. In fact, in places where bans have been enacted, we've seen no meaningful gains in learning or well-being. As clinicians, educators, and parents, we should be skeptical of quick fixes to complex problems. What the evidence does show is this: banning phones doesn't reduce overall screen time. It doesn't consistently improve academic outcomes. It doesn't address the real issues students face: disengagement, inequity, mental health concerns, and a lack of digital guidance. A full-day ban assumes every student has a laptop at home, that they aren't caregivers, that their families can always be reached through the front office. But the reality is, for millions of students, especially those from marginalized communities, a phone is their lifeline to safety, to opportunity, to home. Our job is not to shield students from technology. It's to prepare them to navigate it. We need to teach self-regulation, critical thinking, and digital citizenship. That's what builds resilience. That's what prepares students for the world they're inheriting. This is not a call for chaos. It's a call for structure, support, and smart policies. Let's stop playing cat and mouse games with confiscation. Let's invest in teacher training, student guidance, and classroom strategies that reflect the world we actually live in. Because in the end, education isn't about control. It's not about taking a break. It's about capacity. Let's give students the tools, not just the rules.
Thank you, team opposition. Well, you've heard the arguments, and at this point, it's time to decide which team has convinced you. So please scan the code and enter your final vote on the proposition: should high schools enact full-day smartphone bans? All right, the votes are in, and we can see the results here. And it looks like 51% voted yes, 8% are still uncertain, and 41% said no. So I need to do a little math here. So the originally 33% of you said yes, so we saw 18% convinced by team proposition. Originally, 19% of you voted no, so we saw a 21% increase by team opposition. So I believe we have our results. So congratulations to team opposition, the winners of the 2025 Children and Screens debate. And as a token of our appreciation, I'd like to call Kris Perry forward to present you with your trophies.
Please. Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Yes.
All right, congratulations. And a good 18% of you were convinced by team proposition. So for a very well-argued debate, congratulations to team proposition as well. This concludes our program. Thank you all very much for your participation.